You're crouched by a fire. It's roughly 28,000 years ago, somewhere in the cold stretch of ancient Eurasia, and the sun went down 2 hours back. Something is moving in the dark past the firelight. You can't see it. You can smell it a little. Wet fur, old blood, something that has clearly been outside longer than you have. There is no fence, no alarm system, no emergency number to call, just a fire that occasionally throws sparks, and a handful of people hoping that's enough. So here's the question that should bother you a little. Out of every dangerous animal circling that fire that night, why did humans eventually end up sleeping next to that exact one? Not the deer, not the rabbit, the actual apex predator. The answer goes back further than humans are just good at making friends. It's stranger than that. And once you understand what really happened, you will never look at a sleeping golden retriever the same way again. Let's start from the very beginning. Here's something that should probably make you a little uncomfortable. For most of the time humans have existed on this planet, we were not the most dangerous thing in the room. Wolves hunted in coordinated packs of 6 to 10. They tracked injured prey for days without resting. A human holding a sharpened stick was, frankly, an appetizer with attitude. Did you know? A healthy wolf can cover more than 30 miles in a single day while tracking prey, a pace that would leave most humans collapsed by lunchtime. That is not aggression. That is just a Tuesday for a wolf. And somehow, the direct descendants of that exact animal now get nervous riding in the backseat of a car. History does not record how many early humans lost that particular encounter. It strongly implies the number was not small. And yet, somewhere in the last 30,000 years, this exact animal, the one evolution built specifically to hunt things roughly our size, ended up on the other side of that equation completely. None of the obvious replacements worked out. Not the deer, which trusted nobody. Not the fox, which wanted nothing to do with group living. Just the wolf. The one thing that should have eaten us. That is not a coincidence. That is a clue. Whatever made wolves dangerous turned out to be exactly what made them perfect. Let's go back to that fire. Somewhere between 40,000 and 20,000 years ago, this is where the story gets genuinely strange. Hunter-gatherer bands at the time were small, usually under 50 people, constantly moving, constantly failing to find enough food, and every camp, without meaning to, produced trash. Bones with marrow still inside, skins, carcasses too frozen to bother finishing. To a wolf, that pile of leftovers was a faster meal than chasing a healthy reindeer for 2 days straight. The aggressive ones who pushed too close got speared. The terrified ones stayed too far back and starved. But a small number, just by genetic chance, were calmer, less reactive, willing to tolerate the distance. In 1959, a Soviet geneticist named Dmitry Belyaev started something almost nobody outside genetics has heard of. At a research station in Siberia, he began breeding foxes, selecting only the calmest individual from each litter, generation after generation. He wasn't training them. He was simply removing fear from the population, one generation at a time. Within a decade, the foxes were wagging their tails, whining for attention, licking hands like puppies. Their bodies changed too. Floppy ears, shorter snouts, patches of white fur nobody had bred for on purpose. Think about that. Belyaev never touched a single gene directly. He just removed fear from the equation, and evolution did the rest automatically, almost like it had been waiting for permission. Which means somewhere in an Ice Age camp, the exact same unplanned experiment was already running. Except the subjects were wolves. The timeline was thousands of years instead of decades, and nobody was running it on purpose. Evolution does not believe in consent forms. Now here's where things get genuinely strange, and a little disturbing, honestly. In 2019, researchers comparing the facial muscles of dogs and wolves under a microscope found something specific. Dogs have a tiny muscle near the inner eye that wolves do not have at all. It lets them raise the inner eyebrow into that exact, devastating, sad expression. Every dog owner has fallen for at least once. Wolves cannot physically make that face. Did you know? That muscle is called the levator anguli oculi medialis, and researchers found it appears in essentially no other wild canine. It took roughly 15,000 years of selective survival to produce one extra eyebrow muscle, and its only apparent function seems to be making humans feel guilty for leaving the house. Some of you already know a dog with this exact superpower and have been helpless against it for years. That's fine. Here's the uncomfortable part. Nobody designed this. The dogs whose faces happened to trigger sympathy got fed first, protected first, bred more. Over thousands of generations, an entire species quietly evolved a manipulation tool aimed directly at the human nervous system, and we let it happen. Repeatedly, mostly without noticing. Let's talk about where this actually happened. Because the answer is stranger than one cave, one fire, one moment in history. In 2016, a team of geneticists published findings suggesting dogs may have been domesticated more than once. Two genetically distinct lineages appear to have emerged independently, one in eastern Eurasia and one in the West, with no contact between the groups responsible. Picture two separate bands of hunter-gatherers, thousands of miles apart, going through the exact same slow, accidental process with the exact same nervous animal, each one having absolutely no idea the other existed. That is not one accident. That is the same accident happening twice. And that is not even the strange part, because once humans started farming grain thousands of years later, dogs evolved again, developing extra copies of a gene that lets them digest starch, something wolves still cannot do efficiently to this day. The species kept adapting to us, specifically us, continuously, without being asked. Here's something that should probably make you feel a little different about all of this. In 1914, near Bonn, Germany, workers uncovered a grave roughly 14,000 years old. A man, a woman, and beside them, a young dog. For decades, that was all anyone knew. Then in 2018, a veterinarian named Luke Johnsons examined the dog's teeth using dental analysis and found something the original discovery had completely missed. At 19 weeks old, this puppy contracted a severe viral infection. It relapsed twice more, at 21 weeks, then 23. Each episode, on its own, should have killed it within 3 weeks without help. It lived until roughly 27 weeks old. In the middle of an ice age, when every spare calorie mattered more than almost anything a person owned, someone kept that puppy alive through 6 straight weeks of a disease with no cure and no treatment. Think about that. That is not domestication. That is not utility. A dog that's sick could not hunt, guard, or carry anything. It was, by every practical measure, useless. And they kept it anyway. The wolf that should have eaten us became the first thing we apparently loved enough to bury beside ourselves. Wolves hunted us. Wolves fed on our scraps. Evolution quietly filtered out the dangerous ones and kept the calm ones. A Soviet geneticist accidentally proved the exact mechanism decades later, using foxes instead of wolves. A tiny facial muscle evolved with the apparent sole purpose of making us feel things. It happened more than once, in more than one place, and nobody involved knew they were running an experiment at all. Here's the part nobody puts in the thumbnail. We did not domesticate wolves because humans are uniquely kind, wise, or special among animals. It happened because evolution rewards whatever survives, and being slightly less terrifying turned out to be an excellent survival strategy. In this story, affection looks a lot like a side effect of biology trying to stay alive. But here's the twist. Maybe that does not make it less real. The puppy in that German grave had no idea it was a side effect of evolutionary math. It was just sick and someone stayed. Tens of thousands of years later, an animal descended from the thing that used to hunt your ancestors in the dark is currently asleep somewhere near you, completely unbothered, with no idea any of this history ever happened. If that changed how you think about the dog asleep in the next room, hit that like button right now and subscribe, because next time we're asking a much simpler sounding question. Why are wild animals still terrified of us when we are the slowest, weakest predator most of them have ever encountered? The answer is darker than you expect. See you in the next one.